Hi, I'm Lis Wiehl. I'm going to be with you for the next 3 hours. We're going to go to top crimes first.
Today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. A Halloween party in a California nightclub based on the theme of the horror movie franchise The Purge turned into a real-life horror story when a mass shooting erupted. Authorities were called to the Sevilla nightclub in Riverside around midnight when gunfire was reported both inside and outside of the club. Officers located 2 gunshot victims at the scene, but an additional 5 victims reported to area hospitals with gunshot wounds. Authorities in Missouri have expanded their search for a missing 4-year-old who disappeared from his Jefferson City home last week. Investigators are searching for Darnell Gray, who disappeared from his home on Buena Vista Street, but authorities don't believe they are dealing with a case of parental abduction. A search party of nearly 50 volunteers searched the woods surrounding Washington Park, and investigators are working to drain a nearby pond to search for Darnell. Authorities are offering $500 for information leading to Darnell. CNN's president, Jeff Zucker, announced via Twitter that the news giant intercepted a suspicious package addressed to its headquarters in Atlanta. The package was discovered at an off-site facility where the CNN Center in Atlanta is having its mail screened after a package reportedly containing a pipe bomb was found at its New York offices last week. Cesar Sayoc was arrested last week in connection with a string of packages containing explosives sent to high-profile Democrats and CNN, but it is not clear if this package is linked to him. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
All right, an update in the Kristopher Love case. The state has rested. You know, that's the capital sentencing case. So now we're going to go live to the defense, who's putting on their witnesses. Listen up. Okay, so right now we have the defense witnesses in the Kristopher Love case. I want to bring in my great guest for the next couple of hours. Jerry Girley. Jerry's coming in from Orlando, Florida. Welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jerry, right now we have the defense has rested in the Kristopher Love case. Of course, this is a capital murder case. The state has rested. Now we have the defense. And really, as we've seen from this first witness, this officer where Kristopher Love was in the, not in the general population, but was in protective custody, and as this witness testified, really for his own safety. What the defense is trying to do here, the only objective here is to save Kristopher Love's life. What do you make of what they're trying to do, and what would you, as a criminal defense attorney, be trying to do?
I don't know. It's a difficult task of trying to save someone's life, but you have to do it. You have to show the jury or persuade the jury that somehow this person who's otherwise a decent got off track, and nothing redeeming or nothing productive value is going to be done for society or even for the people who lost a loved one by taking another life. And you have to take that tack. You have to show the jury and persuade the jury that there's a public policy reason for keeping this person alive.
Yeah, and in this case, of course, you know, there was a lot behind this murder, and, you know, there were a lot of people behind it. Well, I say a lot. I mean, there was the getaway driver, there was the planner of this murder, but this person, Mr. Love, is the person who was accused and then tried and convicted of being the shooter, and the shooter, the hitman, and who took money and drugs. I mean, pretty much at the top of the totem pole for, you know, atrocity of murder here. I mean, why would a jury or anyone show any kind of sympathy for Mr. Love, who shot down this beautiful young woman, I mean, at the prime of her life? Why?
Well,
how do you make that argument?
Candidly, I can't say that I can come up with an idea off the top of my head. But in terms of the approach is what we're talking about here. You've got to show that there's some what we call mitigating factors. Right. And what I'm hearing and what I've seen in the short while that I've been observing is that they're not very few. And that's the point that you're making. But you can't just show up in court and say, well, go ahead and kill my client because he's a bad guy. You've got to make your best. You got to take your best shot at it.
And that's what they're trying to do in the Kristopher Love case. All right, Jerry, we'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned, and we'll have more on the Kristopher Love case and more on all the cases that we're watching here on Law and Crime. All right, now we're going to Iowa. You see there a new witness on the stand. He's Deputy Jason Rozell. Let's listen in. All right, this is one of the responders to little baby Sterling, hearing about how he has 4 children, how he has a swing set, just exactly the same model as the baby that he was found in, how the swing set was left in the on position when he came into that room, how he smelled, as he put it, he could say only that it smelled like death. Jerry Girley, what is your take? You're coming to us from Orlando. You're listening to this, all of this testimony, as am I. We're hearing it live. What is your take on this as we're hearing it?
Well, it's difficult to listen to, obviously. But what's dancing in my mind or screaming in my mind is neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, as he's describing the home, not just the room in which the baby is located, but the house, as in general, is one that is not well kept.
He says that, in fact, and what he says, though, what fascinating to me is he says as a smell. He was questioned there in direct examination about the smell, really into the smell, and he says the smell of air freshener. Now, if I was prosecuting this case, I would really use that as air freshener. Because why? Because that would show that the defendant knew that the baby was rotting and was using that air freshener. That would show consciousness of what had happened and was using air freshener to make the air smell better, right, Jerry? I mean, you wouldn't like that if you were defending those facts.
Let's go back to, yes, I agree with you. I seized on that fact. I made a note of that fact.
Right.
However, that goes to what was done after the death. If I'm not mistaken, this particular defendant is charged with first-degree murder, which is premeditated.
Yes. Right.
So, there's some issues that relate to what was done after the child died. And that, of course, shows an awareness that the child was dead. But again, what I see and what comes across to me in this testimony so far is the fact that there is at least gross negligence in terms of a child, and you're regularly checking on him or her and feeding him or her and not know that the child is not breathing and obviously dead. Clearly, that's what I'm saying at this point.
Right. All right, Jerry, let us go to break, and we'll come back with more live testimony and analysis on the other side of the break. All right, let's go back to Texas. In the Kristopher Love case, we have Kristopher Love's mother, Via, on the stand. All right, so we have Via Love on the stand, and she's trying to, Jerry Girley, she's trying to present mitigating circumstances or mitigating factors for why her son, let's get down to brass tacks, why her son should not face the capital murder ultimate punishment, right?
Exactly, and I, unfortunately, I haven't heard much that would persuade a jury that he's deserving of not facing the death penalty. Of course, again, she has to do, or rather the defense attorney has to do what he can. But the fact that the family separated when the child was perhaps in middle school or elementary school, that happens to a lot of people in America. They don't end up committing this type of heinous crime. So that in and of itself is not going to get us to where we need to be. Also, I think about the fact that if I was putting on that evidence, you wouldn't hear the words coming out of my mouth discussing when he got out of juvenile detention, the crimes that he committed in the past, because what that conveys to the jury is that this guy's been a problem for a long time, and he's a menace to society, and he's getting what he deserves, and that's not what the argument you want to make if you're trying to mitigate.
I'm surprised about that, too. Also, even small things like suspensions from school, he's talking about that from, a long time ago. And then the fact that the mother had to work 12-hour days, well, I mean, you know, really making her look bad because she had to work 12-hour days, and you know, well, that to me, again, you know, yeah, many families, that's what happens, and people don't, you know, turn out like this Kristopher Love. I mean, you know, it really, I know it's difficult for the defense, but
It's very difficult. But again, it has to be done. Now I'm not, the mother's doing the best that she can.
she really is.
And she's just telling it matter-of-factly how it was. But there has to be more. I mean, for example, if there was some type of tragedy,
Right.
God forbid, if there was some type of abuse that caused an emotional trauma, I'm not hearing any of those things or anything remotely like that. So I think at this point, perhaps there's going to be more, but at this point, it's coming up short in terms of what he's trying to accomplish.
Exactly. Well, perhaps we'll hear more. We will hear more after this break, so stay with us. All right, let's go straight back to Texas. We have Via Love testifying for her son. All right, so what Via Love has told us, Jerry, is that Kristopher Love, her son, this is all for now for mitigating circumstances to try to keep her son from getting the death penalty, in this case, has had 3 children, mostly when he's been in and out of prison, but has, in her words, as we've just heard, been very caring for them, paid for a lot of their school activities, paid for rent, things like that. What do you see as that being, are those mitigating circumstances in the jury's estimation, in the jury's mind, Jerry?
Possibly. And here's why. Again, we're looking for unintended victims. The victims that they're trying to point out here to the jury are the children. That if you send this guy away for the rest of his life, or actually kill him, then these children are going to not have their father for the rest of their life, and they're going to be damaged. They're going to be traumatized. So if not for the sake of this guy who may or may not be deserving of living any further, do it for these 3 children.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing here.
Exactly. So it's not so much mitigating for him as in he's a good guy, but mitigating in the sense of mitigating further damage that could be done for these children that are out there.
That's what I'm hearing.
Right, exactly. And the fact that they're showing through the mother that he's actually close to these children. I mean, she's making the statements that he's actually close to the children, even though he's been in prison, which we've said, why are the defense saying that? But that even though that he's in prison, he spent time with them. You know, that's her testimony. So if he'd been an completely absentee father, then they wouldn't be able to make this argument. Right,
and of course the argument is that he's not all bad. There's redeeming qualities that he has. I mean, other than this murder that he committed, otherwise he's a pretty decent guy. He paints on a regular basis. He has a skill. He's a productive member of society.
Right.
When he's not in prison, again, I don't think that that's a good argument, but that's the
Jerry,
argument.
we'll have to find out whether one of the kids testifies in his defense coming up after the break. Stay with us. We have breaking news now. The Associated Press has just reported that Whitey Bulger, the infamous gangster from the 1970s and 80s, has been reported dead. He was recently transferred to the USP Hazleton, a high-security prison with an adjacent minimum security satellite camp in Brewston Mills. The Federal Bureau of Prisons had listed Bulger as an inmate there early Tuesday morning. Bulger had been moved from a prison in Florida to a transfer facility in Oklahoma City. The Bureau of Prisons has not declined any more further comment, but the AP, just to repeat that news, the Associated Press has just reported that the infamous gangster, convicted of 11 crimes, 11 murders in the 1970s and 80s, has been reported dead. We'll have more breaking news and more details as it comes into us at Law and Crime. Let's go to top crimes now. All right, let's go back to Jerry. Jerry, I want your this breaking news. You're a criminal defense attorney. We're coming to you out of Orlando, Florida. Breaking news on Whitey Bulger's death.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking in terms of it happening the way that it did. But
right,
in terms
after
of the
transfer.
overall trajectory of his life, it's not outside the pale of the things that could have happened to him, the life that he lived. He lived a very violent life, and apparently he has died the same way.
Well, he was in poor health. He was 89 years old, transferred, so we don't know the details of what happened. Those will be coming in.
Sure.
So we can't really comment on more than what we have right now. But what are your, so let's not comment on that, but what's your reaction to his life and his criminal doings and his convictions for those murders?
Well, let me tell you this. When I meet a person that is suspected of drug dealing, for the first time, often the mother, the father, the sister, brother has retained the firm, and I sit down and talk to that person in jail or wherever they may be detained, and I say to them as a conversation starter, I know something about that company that you work for. They have a bad retirement plan. 2 options. Die early, violently, or prison for the rest of your life. Which were you planning to take? And it's striking to them, but it is definitely the way that things end up in most cases for individuals like Whitey Bulger. So it's tragic that anyone would be brought into that kind of lifestyle and feel the need to take other human lives. Because, again, as I said a moment ago, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So we don't know everything, as you said, and I'm not going to make any conclusory comments in terms of what may or may not have happened. But if I think about the fact that this person ends up dying in prison, it's not that shocking, in the grand scheme of things.
Well, yeah, and he was older, in his 80s, late 80s. He was being moved to the USP Hazleton, a very high security prison, obviously. And but the Federal Bureau of Prisons is not telling us anymore. Associated Press just moments ago confirmed that he was dead. We will be, of course, getting more details. And as soon as we get those details in here at Law&Crime, we'll break in on the trials and give you the more details about Whitey Bulger's, the circumstances of his death. Meanwhile, we have Via Love still on the stand. This is the mother of Kristopher Love. We're in the death penalty stage. The state has rested. The defense is on the stand. We now have, of course, the mother, and she is trying to keep her son off death row here. Let's hear and go on and see more details of that.
We got it from
Via Love is on the stand trying to save her son's life. Let's go to break, and we'll be right back. All right, Via Love remains on the stand, really trying to save her son, Kristopher, in this penalty phase. Jerry, what do you think of that? We've now got her on the stand. She's being cross-examined. How difficult is that if you are the defense lawyer? Your job is really over, but how difficult is it really for anyone to cross-examine the mother of, somebody who's on their really for their life, cross-examining her now?
Well, I think the task, and quite frankly, I think the prosecutor's doing a good job of the task, and that is simply pointing the mother back to the objective reality of what her son has done in terms of committing crimes through the years, and more importantly, bringing it back to the attention of the jury that this is not someone who had one mistake. This is not an outlier here. This is a consistent pattern of bad behavior, escalating behavior, and now it's to the point where society will not be safe if he's released. We unfortunately have to take the ultimate action here. So I think it's not getting into the emotions of it, but simply bringing back the objective evidence and presenting it one after the other, and that's what he's doing here.
Very matter of fact, just one example, he said he made the decision to skip, and she said yes. When she asked where was he, she said he was at home, and then I was at work. He made the decision. He was at home. I was at work. Let's go back to Via Love. All right, Jerry. So that is the cross-examination. Again, very difficult to cross-examine the mother of a defendant who's looking at a capital punishment here, capital murder punishment. I thought the prosecution really did just about all they could. What did you think, Jerry?
Right. I think he had the right tone. He wasn't aggressive, and he wasn't accusatory of the mother because obviously the mother's not on.
Right. Right, exactly. There was nothing to accuse the mother of. I thought the mother did a good job. If anything, I think sympathy was definitely for the mother. She was a hard worker, working 12-hour days. If anything, I think that, you know, we see some of her exiting there, the courtroom. If anything, you know, the defense may have skewed it a little bit. I'm not quite sure what they were trying to do there. You can't be blaming the mother for working 12-hour days. And, you know, the son, then there was at one point they were questioning her about, well, the son, you know, Kristopher was skipping school and he was at home. And how did she know that he was at home? She would call him from work and he was at home, try to get him to go to school. Well, he wouldn't go to school. She's working and he's at home doing what? Watching television or doing drugs later on, right? I mean, it didn't leave a very good impression.
You know, and from the mother's point of view, of course, that's about survival, and anyone can relate to that. Of
course.
And that's not a problem that's limited to individuals of a particular community. I think all single parents have to struggle with that, having a work-life balance, making sure that their children have guidance and supervision. So the jury could relate to that, but again, still not enough, in my thinking, to mitigate this heinous crime that was committed. Yeah,
the only thing there was his caring, as you got to in the later part of her testimony, the caring for the 3 children. He does have 3 children, and that could be a mitigating circumstance for the jury, not for what he did, but that there would be other victims, that is his 3 children, if they were to put him to death. Let's go to break, and we'll be back on the other side for more discussion and more testimony. All right, the Kristopher Love case in Texas has gone on a lunch break, as has a Zachary Koehn case in Iowa. So they're both on lunch break. So it's a good time to go to Top Crimes. Let's listen in.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. A man suspected of impersonating a Secret Service agent was reportedly arrested in South Carolina. 17-year-old Thomason Michael Barrett Hand was caught with a badge, a gun, and a vehicle with blue lights and a siren by deputies in Greenville County. Hand allegedly spent the weekend flashing a fake badge and handgun pretending to be a law enforcement official. Hand now faces 4 counts of impersonating a law enforcement officer. A man in North Carolina was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole for conspiring to kidnap a baby his girlfriend cut from their neighbor's body and lying to police about the horrendous crime. 33-year-old William Cohen pleaded guilty to 2 charges in connection with the killing of 22-year-old Savannah Graywind of Fargo. Cohen's girlfriend, Brooke Cruz, cut Graywind's baby from her womb and is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the killing. Cohen pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kidnap and lying to authorities, but was acquitted of conspiracy to commit murder. A man in Texas is in hot water after a video of him allegedly yelling racially motivated insults at a woman and her 2-year-old daughter was caught on camera. The unidentified irate driver can be seen screaming at Jeanette Sebrew at an intersection in Houston.
You're driving in 2 lanes, you stupid bitch.
Yes?
That's not how we drive in America. Trump's deporting your illegal cousins today, bitch.
Really?
Sebrew filed a police report, but no charges have been filed. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
All right, just in to Law and Crime, we have from the Department of Justice, this is on the Whitey Bulger case, or the Whitey Bulger death, that he was found unresponsive at 8:20 a.m. at the U.S. Penitentiary in Hazleton, that's in Brewston Mills in West Virginia. Life-saving measures were immediately initiated by responding staff. He was pronounced dead there by the Preston County Medical Examiner. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI was notified, and an investigation has been initiated. No other staff or inmates were injured, and no time was the public in danger. Okay, then it goes on to talk about Bulger, this 89-year-old male. We know about Bulger in the 1970s and 80s. He was a gangster. He's committed 11, at least sentenced for 11 murders that we know of. USP Hazleton High Security Facility houses now 1,270 male offenders at the Federal Correction Complex. Okay, additional information will be coming in. This is just what came in across the wires for us from the U.S. Department of Justice. We will have more and keep you updated as we get it. This just came in right now. Whitey Bulger, dead at the age of 89 years old. All right, let's go now. Both of our trials that we've been watching today at Law and Crime are both in lunch break, so it's a perfect time for us to recap and go to the Cohen case. Of course, little baby Sterling, 4 months old. Let's go to just today. We have the opening statements in that. Let's listen in to the prosecution, the opening statements in the Cohen case. All right, you're hearing the beginning of the prosecution opening statements in the Iowa versus Cohen case. Let's listen in and hear more. The prosecution is laying out their case about what happened to little Sterling, 4-month-old Sterling. Let's listen in as they proceed. The prosecution is painting a gruesome picture in this case about little Sterling. Let's listen in as they finish up their opening statement. Okay, that was the prosecution opening statement in the Cohen case. As you'd all know, you've been following this today. This is having to do, it's a very gruesome case is really how you have to put it, right, Jerry? I mean, there's just no way around it. I've got Jerry Girley out of Orlando, Florida, helping me today, criminal defense attorney. Jerry, tough case for the prosecution to put on and even go through the facts as they are there in the opening statement. They really framed it as a blessing, that Sterling is a blessing. And then that with that blessing of this little baby came the responsibility. So on the one hand, you have a blessing of the baby, and then on the other hand, you have the responsibility that comes with being a parent. And of course, this defendant obviously did not bear up to that responsibility. How did you think the prosecution did in their opening statement?
Well, I thought that the prosecutor did well. That said, in my mind, I'm still looking at the level of charge, which is first-degree murder,
right.
Premeditated. This is an intentional act. You have to prove that there was a willfulness there. What I'm hearing, and it could just be the criminal defense attorney in me that's listening in that way, with that lens, but what I'm hearing is something short of that. So I think unless there's some other evidence, well, first of all, opening statement is not evidence, it's a preview right. of what you anticipate the evidence will be. But unless there's actual evidence that shows a malintent, what we're talking about here is reckless indifference toward the child. And that's the language that you would expect when you talk about responsibility. But if that's so, in my thinking, I'm thinking second-degree murder on the top end, negligent homicide on the bottom end. So I don't know. I haven't heard enough.
Right, and we're so early on in this trial, and the charge is, felonious child endangerment and first-degree murder. So child endangerment being a little bit lesser, which is interesting. It goes exactly to your point. And we wonder, is it going to meet that first-degree murder, that premeditation? Did they premeditate? Now, premeditation doesn't have to be, as we know, doesn't have to take a long time, days and weeks to premeditate. It can happen in just a few moments. But very interesting points, Jerry. We'll pick it up on the other side. Let's go to a quick break, and we'll be back on the other side of the break. Go back to the Cohen case now, where we're replaying the prosecution's opening from earlier today. Listen. Okay, very factually based prosecution opening statement. Fact, what they saw. Blessing little Sterling, responsibility. Obviously, the defendant did not meet that responsibility in the most egregious of ways. Jerry Girley in Orlando, Florida, why at the end did the prosecution bring up this fact that the defendant had made $45,000 a year and had health insurance? Why was that important in the opening statement? Well,
I think the point that he was trying to make was that if there was a medical issue with the child, and if the parents were being attentive, as normal parents are, there was the resources and the wherewithal to provide the needed health care to the child.
And that they didn't.
So it's just evidence of neglect.
Right. And we're talking about felonious endangerment to the most horrible degree here. Okay. So I just thought I want to keep people aware of, these little facts that come in and when they do. All right, let's go now to the defense opening, and let's see what the defense had to say to counter, obviously, the prosecution. Listen in. All right, the defense is keeping it short and sweet in the Cohen case in their opening statement. They're talking about it being a tragedy, which it certainly is, and the jurors can all agree to that. They're talking about no rush to judgment, that the jury should not make a rush to judgment, keep their common sense, don't make a rush to judgment. And whereas the prosecution had said that little Sterling was a blessing and that the defense had, or Mr. Cohen had not lived up to his responsibility. So there you have it. You have the prosecution on one side saying Sterling was a blessing, and the defendant had absolutely not lived up to his responsibility, had a $45,000 a year job and health insurance, and he did nothing to save his little child. In fact, he killed his little child. So, and the defense on the other side saying this is a tragedy. Don't rush to judgment. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Stay with us for more in the Cohen case. Welcome back to the top of the hour here at Law and Crime, which means we should go to Top Crimes. Here we are.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. A man suspected of impersonating a Secret Service agent was reportedly arrested in South Carolina. 17-year-old Thomason Michael Barrett Hand was caught with a badge, a gun, and a vehicle with blue lights and a siren by deputies in Greenville County. Hand allegedly spent the weekend flashing a fake badge and handgun pretending to be a law enforcement official. Hand now faces 4 counts of impersonating a law enforcement officer. A man in North Carolina was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole for conspiring to kidnap a baby his girlfriend cut from their neighbor's body and lying to police about the horrendous crime. 33-year-old William Cohen pleaded guilty to 2 charges in connection with the killing of 22-year-old Savannah Graywind of Fargo. Cohen's girlfriend, Brooke Cruz, cut Graywind's baby from her womb and is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the killing. Cohen pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kidnap and lying to authorities, but was acquitted of conspiracy to commit murder. A man in Texas is in hot water after a video of him allegedly yelling racially motivated insults at a woman and her 2-year-old daughter was caught on camera. The unidentified irate driver can be seen screaming at Jeanette Sebrew at an intersection in Houston.
You're driving in 2 lanes, you stupid bitch.
Yes?
That's not how we drive in America. Trump's deporting your illegal cousins today, bitch.
Really?
Sebrew filed a police report, but no charges have been filed. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Well, in that first case, impersonating a Secret Service agent, all I can say is if you go around impersonating law enforcement, you're probably going to be dealing a lot with law enforcement. You know what I mean? Bad idea. Okay, let's go back now to the Cohen case. Both cases that we've been following, the Kristopher Love case and the Cohen case, are in lunch break right now. So we're taking the opportunity to go back to some earlier testimony from today in the Cohen case. And we're going to go to, since we've heard both openings, the first responder in the Cohen case. Now let's hear that testimony. kids are different. That's Tony Friedrich. She's the registered nurse, first responder on the scene in the Cohen case. Let's listen in more to her testimony, what she responded to. Just watching this registered nurse, Tony Friedrich, respond to going over to the baby, as she said, eyes never blinked, arm was cold. Gives me the chills. Let's listen into more of her testimony. Wow. Difficult testimony to hear. That is from a first responder in the Cohen case out of Iowa. We're talking about horrific child abuse allegations resulting in the death of little Sterling. She talks about look, listen, and feel, a test that she's been given, obviously, as a responder, a first responder in child abuse cases, that she said she could not do CPR in this case because the child was rigid and stiff, so she couldn't even touch the child. She talked about the smell of urine. She talked about all of these kinds of things having to do with Sterling. This is, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, as even the defense said in this particular case, not particular just to this family alone. This is really an epidemic, child abuse and child neglect in this country, this great country of ours. The Child Protective Services Agency in this country, which is charged with protecting children as much as the federal agency is charged with. Here's some stats here from them. Let me just give you, they get 3.6 million referrals right there a year, 6.6 million children involved. This comes from their stats. 1.58 million children die as a result of child abuse or child neglect a year. That's deaths in 2014. That's the latest stats that they have from Child Protective Services. That results in, just to bring it down to you guys in real stats that we can actually digest in a sickening way, that is 4 to 5 deaths of children a day due to child abuse and child neglect in this country. 4 to 5 deaths of children in a day due to child abuse or child neglect in this country. I mean, that's a pretty damning statistic. So I would call that an epidemic. I don't really know any other word for it than a child abuse epidemic in this great country of ours. It is not just in the Cohen case, but it is really in this country. So let's go to break, and we'll have more of the Cohen case and back to the Love case as well when they come back from lunch. All right, the Cohen case, the Cohen case is back live. We have that back live. We have Deputy Rozell on the stand. We can see the courtroom there. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're going to just work with it for just a moment there. But he was just on the stand. They are looking, it looks like they may have been going back and forth with the judge here a little bit. But they did have him on the stand. Now remember, Deputy Rozell is important because he was coming from the other side of, just about as far away as you could have been coming from Chickasaw County to get to the actual scene. It took him about 14 minutes to get there, and that was very important as it was early on his examination. So it took him about 14 minutes to get there, and then he was talking about when he got there, what he observed, and what he smelled. And he really, this was a deputy, or is a deputy on the stand. He talked about, having a swing, pretty much the same make and model as little Sterling, for one of his children. He himself has about 4 children, and one of his children has a swing that's the same make and model as little Sterling. So this deputy, in my estimation, as I was watching him earlier this morning, was just kind of, breaking up a little bit, remembering and recalling, going into that scene, seeing little Sterling. Of course, he didn't know as he was coming in. His back was to the scene. First, the smell hit him, and saw this make and model of this swing. He noticed that the swing was on the on button, was left on the on button. I query whether that will become important to the prosecution's case later. I also wonder whether it will become very important to the prosecution's case that everything was left sort of as is, with the then body of Sterling left in the seat, not removed, left there to decompose, as we've heard from these first responders, hence the smell. The air freshener, we've already heard from several witnesses, was used. The smell of the air freshener mingling with the urine, you can just imagine what the officer and the nurse were smelling, and they were responding to this. The nurse that we heard earlier today, she was clearly emotional upon hearing and coming into this. So we're getting all of this testimony, very live and very real from these first responders. It's a little bit different, I think, from many of the cases of these first responders when they're responding to either missing persons that we've had here in Law and Crime, or even adults when they've come into a first responder kind of situation. When we've got this little Sterling 4-month-old and the kind of scene that they came into and the smells that they came into, I think these images have really resonated with these first responders, and I think that is why you're getting such testimony that you're hearing this morning from these witnesses. It's very real, it's very colorful, and it's kind of tough to hear, honestly. But I think it's what the prosecution has to do, because they're going for felonious endangerment and they're going for murder. Now, a murder would carry for them, for Cohen, if found guilty, a mandatory sentence of life in prison. So if this jury finds him guilty of that first degree, that would be a mandatory sentence of life in prison. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So the prosecution is going for that mandatory life sentence, and it's got to show that he intended for the murder of the little Sterling, not just that it was sort of negligence and reckless disregard. The jury is coming in now, being seated as we're seeing here, the lawyer's sitting down. So it looks like we're going to be getting underway. This is after the lunch break, and we'll be getting underway with another witness. But it's very important that you realize this under the context of what's going on here, how the stakes are so high, that the prosecution could have gone for neglect. They could have gone for something much lesser than this. They could have pled this out, and they did not do that. But let's go here now again. First-degree murder, accused of murdering his 4-month-old son, Sterling. Let's go live into the courtroom and see what's going on now after the lunch break. Fascinating testimony. We'll listen to more after this break. Whitey Bulger was found dead in prison today. The Department of Justice has issued a statement saying that Bulger was found unresponsive at 8:28 a.m. this morning. 8:20 a.m. this morning. Life-saving measures were initiated immediately, but he was found unresponsive. He was pronounced dead by a medical examiner. An FBI investigation has been initiated. Multiple reports say that he was killed, but the Department of Justice has not confirmed that. Multiple reports say he was killed, but the Department of Justice has not confirmed that. So, Whitey Bulger found dead at age 89 years old. Now, let's get back to our trial. That is Iowa versus Zachary Koehn. We have Jason Rozell. He is a first responder on the stand. He continues his testimony now. Okay, quick cross-examination of that detective. One thing you don't want to do in cross-examination is ask the question that you don't really know the answer to, and this cross-examiner did. He asked 10 degrees. How do you know it was 10 degrees warmer in the room? Did you really have a thermometer? And this detective said, Well, actually not at the time, but then later, just a few minutes later, actually we did come back with a thermometer. We did have a thermometer, and it was 10 degrees warmer in the little baby's, in Sterling's room. So not maybe the best question. Also, taking the chair apart, they took actually the chair apart to get the body out. So they didn't actually have to touch the body. They took the chair apart to get the body out. That was cross-examination, no redirect. We'll have a new witness on the stand. Let's go to break, and we'll be right back after that. All right, we have a new witness on the stand in the Cohen case in Iowa, so let's listen in. We have Jerry McGrath. He is a paramedic and medical investigator. Let's listen in. We've just heard his qualifications. As you hear from these first responders in the Cohen case in Iowa, I want you not to forget the larger backdrop of child abuse and child neglect in this country when we have 4 to 5 children a day that are killed in this country by child abuse or child neglect. It's a sorry backdrop. I'll be with you again next week. Until then, I'll be back for Law and Crime. Stay tuned.